Hello, everyone. I'm Keith Stone, your host for Office Hours for HeroesX version 12. And I'm here with Greg and Janet and Sarah and Aylin, as usual, for the discussion of hours 15 and 16, the discussion questions that Greg, you have written. And the hour 15 discussion question is, from philosophers and other sources, we get the distinct impression that the ancient Greeks had sentimental feelings about the heroes that they worshipped. Do you see any traces of such sentimentality in the Iliad and Odyssey? I can easily imagine why you could answer either yes or no. What have folks been saying in answer to this question?
Well, one of them is wondering, were characters represented in a different way in Iliad because it was an enclosed system?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's an enclosed system, but I would think that the reception of the Iliad would be a wider lens. In other words, even the grouping that is the receiving medium. Notice, I think that even reception is a medium. The receiving medium of the Odyssey has access the way we do not have access to other ways of talking about Achilles, where Achilles, for example, is more sentimental, where arguably Odysseus and Penelope are more sentimental, although they get pretty sentimental. I'm thinking of those two primary heroes, but there are others. I guess the closest thing to sentimentality in the Iliad now is when old Phoenix says to Achilles, you remember when you were a baby? Well, you can't remember when he was a baby, but I remember when you were a baby how you spat up on me and how I was like a mother to you. That's pretty sentimental. And there's the background where in some versions it's pretty clear that Thetis had abandoned the baby right away. And then there are other versions where she has come back and comforted him, but you can't really tell for sure. So I'd say mother-child relations, and in the Iliad, I guess the best shot we have is Phoenix reminding Achilles of how he was like a mother to him. Another shot might be the way Thetis and Achilles speak to each other, but I must say I could see that becoming much more tender. And you and I, Keith, in the college version of Heroes, like to show the Michelangelo sculpture of the Pietà. But even the Pietà is not really sentimental. It's just loving.
Very restrained.
It's very restrained. So I'm not doing a good job of answering my own question. So let's hear some more thoughts from the participants.
I was wondering, core vocabulary for this hour is semi-name.
Yes.
Would be more indications of sentimental feelings than explicit
Okay.
indicate.
I like that. In that case, we could definitely factor in the instructions given by Nestor to Antilochos in Iliad 24, where again we have, for the background, a wider lens for Iliad reception. Surely the way that whole scene is appreciated most is if it is understood that this young man will die for his father. And it's almost as if the father is self-aware of the whole epic tradition, the wider epic tradition. And that could be read, and I'm thinking of Say My Name, because there's such an emphasis on the word sema as a marker, as a signal, as a almost a symbol of what a hero's death is all about. And there's also a direct reference to the possibility of a tomb of a hero, and it goes on and on. So yes, so maybe you just have to be smart to be able to get the sentimentality. By you, I mean Homeric reception.
It's a kind of inos or something to
Yes.
be distinguished.
Yes, because after all, you have to be emotionally adept.
I was wondering, Greg, then about the way that, particularly in the Philostratus, the sort of longing for that connection with the cult hero and the way it's expressed through the lush vegetation, whether we can see similar sorts of diction in the Iliad and the Odyssey. Odyssey, I think, particularly.
Yes.
You have the gardens of Alcinous. He's not a cult hero exactly, but there's that same almost godlike
Yes.
presentation. And we see also in the Orchard of Laertes, it's again making a connection with somebody who's not quite dead yet, but nearly.
Oh, Sarah, I'm so glad you mentioned the Orchard of Laertes. Yes. And there, the sentimentality is, it's almost like Proust, isn't it? It's like these small capsules of very intense memories that are sentimental, but it's sentimental only for somebody who experiences it in youth. So the fact that the father would take the son, the young boy, through the orchard every day and almost mark his sentimental landscape. There was this tree here and that tree there, and how they balance, and how it all adds up to this perfect orchard.
So that connection with memory as well, that's important, isn't it? Because Nestor giving advice to Antilochus is keep it in your mind. Laertes to Odysseus, keep it in your mind.
Yes.
And so it's almost keeping a memory alive. Is that part of that?
I love that. And we can count on our dear colleague Hélène to bring us all sorts of other French analogies for what I'm striving for here, a kind of sentimental education.
So éducation sentimentale. Yeah. But thinking about that, I was also thinking of the passage when Priam is with Achilles, and Achilles is, thinking of his own father, and also of Patroclus. So we do have some very touching moments then.
Yes, and another one I'm thinking about, very, very similar, you inspire me to think of this, is the lament of Achilles for Patroclus, which is almost overshadowed by the lament of Briseis for Patroclus, which is so operatic. But when Achilles does his lament, after the lament of Briseis, the line where he refers to his own son has a kind of sentimental, how shall I say it, pet name for him. Well, it's not really a pet name for us. It's fiery red, Pyrrhus. Elsewhere, the son is Neoptolemos. That's a more grown-up name. I regret the way I said that, because Pyrrhus or Pyrrhos is also a grown-up name, but shall we say it's more intimate and maybe sentimental, even though it has a violent meaning, fiery red.
So it comes back to that intimacy is an important part.
I think maybe that's the better word here, intimacy, even if it's a potentially warrior-like name. It has, I guess, sub-meanings. It could just be somebody who's a redhead, but I don't want to push that too far.
Well, how about hour 16?
Let's have a look.
The question for hour 16 is, if you were attending the first performance of the Agamemnon of Aeschylus in 458 BCE, would you need the background that you get from hearing about Agamemnon in a performance of the Iliad?
That's a trick question.
We learn about Agamemnon in the Iliad. So,
I think we already dislike him.
are we supposed to like Agamemnon in the Agamemnon?
I don't think so.
Or-
I'm sorry, I'm cutting off the reactions of the participants. So why don't I take that all back and or let's put it this way, let's widen the lens.
So were the dramas more based on an Athenian view of the whole epic tradition?
Yeah, well, the most evident detail about that is that Agamemnon is king of Argos, and in 458 Argos was the ally of Athens against Sparta, and it's kind of an obliteration of a Spartan participation in the genealogy of Agamemnon and Menelaus, or at least in the politics of Agamemnon and Menelaus. But aside from such political dimensions, yeah, it's a situation where Athens, or shall I say Athenians in Athens, can identify more readily with Argives and Argos than what you see in the Iliad, where Agamemnon is king of Mycenae and where Argos is visualized as the general area, the Argive plain that is dominated by Mycenae. So it's a different picture. It is much more politicized, but that's not what you want me to talk about, I'm sure, dear participants. I should talk about whether he is simpatico or not. Well, what pops into my mind is how nasty he is already in the Iliad 1, how he speaks about Clytemnestra in front of Achilles and the priest and the entire assembly of Achaeans. He is just so contemptuous and undervaluing of a woman whom he courted when he was young and she was young. There's an expression in Homeric Greek, kouridie, which means like, it should mean something like childhood sweetheart. And oh, we're getting sentimental again. It's an epithet that conjures how young people, even teenagers or post-teenagers, but still very young people, feel about each other when they're courting. And this is supposed to be a marriage for the first time for the couple. And for Agamemnon to be quite so unfeeling, saying, well, there's Clytemnestra, forget about her, even though she was my childhood sweetheart. Now I'm obsessed with Chryseis, and she's young and she's going to be my trophy wife. And I find it very, very repellent how he talks about her. And I think it's not just my reaction. I think it's an intended characterization of Agamemnon as a cad. Now, we know that Agamemnon was worshipped as a cult hero in Argos at precisely this time, and probably earlier. We know that from archaeological evidence at Argos. But we also know, don't we, that just because a hero is worshipped in hero cult, that doesn't mean that he's likable or she is likable. And cult heroes are not necessarily likable. By the way, he's not that likable in the Odyssey either.
Yeah. Actually, I was going to ask about that because your question was framed about the Iliad, but we do get lots of little snippets about Agamemnon in the Odyssey as well. Little bits of that sort of predate, as it were, the Iliad, and also postdate the Iliad, and postdate the play, the Agamemnon, because he's already dead, and we see him in we see him in Hades, for example. We hear other people talking about him.
Yes, and aside from the fact that he's so self-pitying, but I can understand his self-pity. It's a very negative view of Agamemnon, especially in Odyssey 24, where, okay, it's not Agamemnon, if you like, it's his psyche, it's the disembodied conveyor of his identity after death. It's almost like a video that keeps looping over and over and over again, how miserable he must be if he were conscious, since the key to his homecoming, Clytemnestra, turned out to be the key to his destruction, and therefore the messing up of his epic reputation. He will always be a foil for Odysseus, just as in the Iliad, he was already a foil for Achilles. Bad luck, or may we say epic destiny.
Some of the participants tapped into World of the Movies, Marvel movies, and they said if Joker is playing now, and to understand Joker, you don't have to watch Batman, perhaps, but if you watched it, you might understand it better.
Oh yes.
But by itself, Joker is still addressing the audience, and I was thinking of Breaking Bad, and I think there's a spin-off from there, Ask Sal, or I'm not sure about the name, but you can still watch the other without knowing the previous.
Yes. But you have a narrower lens.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
And those who are lucky to have watched Batman will have a wider lens for the Joker. But it's not necessary. That's the beauty of this medium, is it's okay if you miss out on certain aspects of the tradition, because the tradition is so rich that you have a feast even if you've never tasted certain dishes.
So maybe, Greg, I could sort of flip the question a little bit and wonder how much we've got the Iliad, the Odyssey, but there were other parts of the epic cycle. There's the part of the story that we hear in the Agamemnon. To what extent not knowing, what's going to happen, what happened before, to what extent is that necessary for us to understand the Iliad and the Odyssey?
I think in the case of ancient Homeric reception, but only in the case of ancient, when you heard the Iliad, you knew a lot already about what happened before, and I think that's the only way I can understand how the Iliad handles that first encounter between Achilles and Thetis. It's presupposed that even if Thetis abandoned Achilles when Achilles was a baby, there have been epic traditions where he has already been comforted by Thetis, who comes out of nowhere and says, "What's the matter, honey? Why are you sad?"
To take another example that's come up is the Oath of Tyndareus. Why everybody was there is something that's sort of outside of that little sort of time slot, as it were, and yet presumably the ancient audience would have been aware of
Well, I think
why everybody turned up and why Achilles was, well, it's not really my fight.
that's such a good example, dear Sarah. And could I say that sometimes I torture my friends? So let me torture the participants out there for a few minutes. We know from a fragment, this is a fact, we know from a fragment of Hesiotic poetry that everybody knew that there were only two Achaeans who did not participate in the oath, where the idea was if Helen is abducted, we'll all join to recover. And these two did not participate in the oath because they did not court, or can I use that older English word, woo, W-O-O, Helen. They were not suitors of Helen. So the quiz for our participants out there is, who were the two who did not court Helen, who did not have the fortune or misfortune of being a suitor of Helen? And I know that our group here already knows the answer because I've tortured you about it before. But for the participants out there, I hope you're now saying, okay, I give up. Who are the two? Can I just give the answers? Achilles. Okay. Mm-hmm. But who's the second one? And this is the killer. It's Menelaus himself. The husband never courted the wife. Why? Because Agamemnon did it for him. In the tradition of American pseudo-epic, I think of Miles Standish in the poetry of Longfellow, where another hero does the courtship for the hero who gets to marry the woman. But that's not a really good example, so maybe we erase the Longfellow example. But isn't that amazing? It gives extra pungency, I think, to that passive-aggressive statement by Achilles in Iliad 9. Is it only the sons of Atreus, that is, Agamemnon and Menelaus, who love their wives? I loved Briseis. There's another case where he gets sort of sentimental, more sentimental than he was in Iliad 1.
Mm-hmm. But it tells us a lot about the two brothers.
Oh my God, it says everything. And that's why when I see the film Troy, I must say, well, I don't want to spoil it for participants, but let's just say what happens in the film Troy, directed by Peterson, is not what happens in the Iliad or anywhere else.
No, but in the Iliad, we have one passage. Menelaus is wounded, and Agamemnon is very scared that he's going to die. He really loves his brother, and he holds his hand, and so there's some sentimentality here.
I mean, there's a real irony there too, because of course, thanks to Helen, because it's Menelaus who marries Helen, he is guaranteed immortalization after death. Guaranteed. As we know from the prophecy of Proteus in the Odyssey. He's guaranteed. It's not spelled out directly by the narrator, by Homer. It's spelled out by this multiform character Proteus, or Proteus, the Protean foreteller. Menelaus, you're going to live forever. It's of course not stated that even he has to die before he gets to do that. But anyway, that makes it sort of ironic, isn't it, that Menelaus is explicitly a candidate for immortalization. I would say that Agamemnon is implicitly a candidate. But for Agamemnon to be so worried about the death of Menelaus is very ironic from a Homeric point of view.
Well, I think we're about out of time, so we need to wrap up. So I will thank you again for this wonderful conversation. I can't wait till next time.
And maybe we'll have a quiz next time too. Playful.
I hope so. Bye now.